Hey folks, welcome. Please come on in. I'm Josh. I'll be leading the webinar today. I'll introduce myself pretty soon. We're just going to give folks another minute to enter the Zoom room, and we'll be starting at 1 p.m. Central Time. So make yourself comfortable. Get a cup of tea. Set your work aside, perhaps. Notebook. Whatever you need. Get ready, and then we'll get started. Okay. 1 o'clock. We'll kick it off. So, hi everyone. My name is Josh. You can see on the slide. I work here at Valiantys as a personal development coach, and I work closely with our team leads and help them with their team building, internal kind of issues that they're dealing with. Very much the people person here. I'm also certified as a safe Scrum Master, so I do occasionally work with Scrum Masters and have performed that role. And I'm also a Myers-Briggs certified facilitator, so I work with folks and individuals who do Myers-Briggs. So that's me. I'm really looking forward to working with you today. So a little bit about why we're here today. I am here to offer you practical solutions to any issues that you might have interpersonally, earning the trust of your team, either other team members or your manager, or potentially those you are managing. And a lot of these skills can also be applied for clients that you're working with or potential partners. So that is the thrust of the webinar today. So if you are here for that, you're in the right place. Solutions to trust, creating a foundation of trust. So let's go over the agenda of what we're going to be doing today. So I am going to start today's webinar by discussing some of the theory behind trust building. Why is it valuable? And what are the resources that we're specifically building on in our work with trust? So that you can have a toolkit if you want to do some research on your own. After that, I'm going to go into 5 specific practical tools to help you build trust in your relationships with folks. These are designed so that you can leave this webinar today and be able to execute on these actions in your conversations with your teammates, managers, direct reports. Then I'm going to do a demonstration of how you can use tools to assist you in trust building and leverage that trust to collaborate. I'll be doing that in Jira software. We are, as I said, I'll go back to the first slide here. We are Valiantys. We are a platinum solution partner with Atlassian, and likely you probably have some people in your office who use Atlassian products, Jira, Trello, Jira Service Management, Bitbucket. There are all sorts of products they've created. And we help and consult people on the implementation of those products. We help with governance, processes, and understanding the tools. So I'm going to be going through how tools like Jira, specifically Jira, can be used to build trust and some of the features to look for when you're attempting to do that. And then lastly, we'll go back to the agenda. Lastly, I'm going to talk about a team building activity that builds trust through mutual understanding. It's Myers-Briggs workshop. So if you're curious about the Myers-Briggs theory, that's a really fun place. The idea, whether you're curious or not, though, is that this is what I would call a catalyst for team building, something that speeds up the process of interpersonal relationships, and it makes it can get people unstuck if they've sort of been in a rut of a certain relationship. And during that time, I'll go over the theory and give you a breakdown of the workshop that we run and how it works. I promise you, it is not touchy-feely. It is incredibly useful for your work. So that's it. All right. So we'll start off with theory, concepts. So the materials that I'm going to be sharing are built on these 2 different books that we've read and that are kind of important in our office culture in general. First one is The Trusted Advisor. This book is about sort of relationship-oriented advice, really how to earn trust on an interpersonal level. And it makes the assertion that one thinks that when giving advice or consulting or offering what what you think is the best thing to do, the only thing to do is to be rational and to sort of tell them factually. And if you're really competent and really rational and you're right about what the answer is, shouldn't matter. The truth is that it's a lot deeper than that, and trust is an emotional thing that has to go into how relationships are actually built and the process that you use to take someone from a stranger to someone who's actually willing to take your advice and move with it. So it kind of attacks that misconception, and then talks about what it looks like to be someone who is truly trustworthy, and that's generally someone who you would not only trust with your finances, but you would trust. Who you would not only trust, say, with the implementation of a project, but someone who you would ultimately trust watching your kids or something along those lines. Like trust can go very deep and can be much broader than just personal expertise. The second book that we base this on is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I'll read this off the slide. Teamwork is the ultimate competitive advantage. However, many teams are dysfunctional. An absence of trust is the key problem that leads to the other 4 dysfunctions. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is a book that goes over a theory about a highly dysfunctional executive team. It tells the story of a highly dysfunctional executive team and uses the theory of the 5 dysfunctions to show how a CEO named Catherine gets brought onto their company and addresses the issues that they're having on their team. The first problem that leads to all of the others, we discovered as we were reading this, was the absence of trust. With an absence of trust, politics can become a very serious issue. People can feel threatened by each other. This means that communication and collaboration slow down in a really big way. And what communication does happen tends to be very confrontational. We would call this unproductive conflict. So you're not able to address things because people are misinterpreting each other's intentions. They're using blame or other hurtful language in their conversations, like very frequently. And people are more often listening to rebut each other than they are to actually understand. This is a problem, and it might seem recognizable to you. The book then goes through a process through which you can take a team that is in that sort of a dysfunctional place and move them into one where they can trust each other and feel that they can be open, and all of a sudden you can have ease of collaboration and understanding, which not only affects a team's performance, but also affects their retention and their ability to kind of like, I believe that it spreads outside of work, that reduced stress overall improves the lives of the people who work there. So absence of trust is the first dysfunction. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, amazing book. Reread it when we were having issues with our own teams as ways to start to address the personnel problems. So there's this great quote from the book where Catherine, the new CEO, is addressing the executive team. And she says, "We have a more experienced and talented executive team than any of our competitors. We have more cash than they do. Thanks to Martin and his team, we have better core technology, and we have a more powerful board of directors. Yet in spite of all that, we are behind 2 of our biggest competitors in terms of both revenue and customer growth." Can anyone here tell me why that is? Silence. This is how she kicks off a meeting where she's going to have a straight talk with her executive team about what's going on. And as you can imagine, this gets their attention. So, people, processes, and tools. This is the Agile Manifesto. People and interactions over processes and tools. So, people is always the first one in that list. And I just want to make the point that great tools and even solid processes cannot overcome a fundamental lack of trust. between people or fundamental problems in how people are working together. Whether they're avoiding accountability or avoiding conflict, or it is actually a lack of trust, the people problems are often something we'll step over. The first thing that everyone does when they meet is simply talk about what the project is and what they think the processes of work are going to be, how they're going to do it. The how very quickly becomes that. And people don't address things like how they prefer to be communicated to, how much communication works for them, issues that you might encounter with them, whether they're sensitive or perhaps the opposite. There's someone who is extremely outspoken and might not take other people's feelings into consideration. Learning to work with each other as people is kind of the foundation of trust, and will make the other things that cascade down from it, the processes and the tools, work much more efficiently. All right, so I just want to say that. So this is essentially the benefits of what teamwork can give you and your team. So first off, collaboration. When people can understand each other easily and feel comfortable, think about someone who you trust inviting you to go to a concert with them, someone who you like, someone who's a close friend. They want to do an activity with you, say a concert. Or maybe they want to invite you to see a speaker with them. Imagine if this is someone you trust, are you pretty likely to assume that they know you well enough that this will be a good fit? Well, if it is, then yeah, you'll probably feel good about going. Versus someone who maybe you don't trust and they might offer you to do something and maybe it's not exactly what you were hoping for, or you don't agree with it. Even if it is right up your alley, if it's someone that you don't trust, you're going to be less likely to want to do it, to want to spend time and kind of put in the effort to do it. So trust really helps with collaboration, working together. It also is a space for healthy conflict. When we are allowed to be open with our opinions, conflict is going to happen. People are going to have disagreements about what they think the best path forward is between them all together. And so being able to have healthy conflict is a huge thing. And we'll talk about that later on in the talk. There's also less red tape. People are more likely to simply give you the go-ahead to try something instead of needing to get approval from a number of different people because they're not sure. They don't want to do something wrong and offend someone. You can also receive effective feedback. If someone you trust tells you something that is uncomfortable to hear, but ultimately good for you, then you're going to be able to swallow the pain and discomfort of, yeah, I do talk too much in meetings. It's a fact. And be able to do something about it. Effective feedback, that is feedback that actually changes the behavior of the person that you're talking to. If you are dealing with a low trust situation, they can tell you you talk too much during meetings, but you're going to be much more likely to feel defensive and not want to hear it, or not really trust that they have the authority to talk about something so personal. So trust allows you to give effective feedback, which is huge. It also creates easier alignment. If we're good at understanding one another, then we can understand ultimately what our shared goal is. It allows for accountability, where I can hold you accountable for things and you can understand that. It also allows for fresh initiatives, where if an employee is trusted, knows that their boss trusts them to do the best job, if they have a new idea, they'll be willing to bring it up to their boss and say, hey, I think we could try this. And in a trusting relationship, the boss will actually consider that idea and possibly implement it on their behalf or in partnership with them, or simply say, yeah, go ahead and try it. So trust allows the creation of fresh initiatives. Without that, there might be this feeling of like, nah, I don't know, or I don't see the value in it, or you might not even feel comfortable. The employee might not even feel comfortable enough to bring that up to their boss because they'll assume that it will be shot down or disregarded or argued with in some way. The last thing is people putting the needs of the team over their own, which is ultimately having dedication. And that really comes down to caring about each other and caring about the success of the team more than their own individual egos. All right, so let's jump into the tools. So the first one that you can consider for yourself is putting your self-interest in check. This can be challenging to do when you're dealing with someone. Because I think by default, we want to put our own self-interest first. But in order for someone to trust us, they need to feel that we care about them and what matters to them. So the first thing you can do is look when you're going into an interaction with someone, do I know what they want? Do I know what matters to them? Am I willing to listen when they tell me what matters to them? And even if it contradicts what I might want, be able to set that aside at least initially in the conversation. So there's this great story that I heard about starting to see a dentist. You know, this couple begins working with a dentist for the first time. They're both going and doing it. And the night after their first dental appointment, the dentist calls and asks how their teeth are doing or if they need any extra prescriptions, if they're in any pain. And they kind of assume that maybe he's just asking because maybe he's got a deal with the pharmacist or something. They give him a cut of pain medication. So he does that. And that was a little off-putting after their first visit. However, they stuck around. He did a good job. And ultimately, if they said they were fine, he didn't press the issue. And then after a couple more years of seeing this dentist, he would call every time and he would ask, how are you doing? How are your teeth? Are you in any pain? And over time, they learned that this was an individual who actually really cared about them. So when the time did eventually come for him to recommend some more costly procedures for them to have done, they trusted him enough to go ahead and say yes and do it. So putting your self-interest in check is pretty key. It also allows you to be able to listen to the other person without having an agenda. What I say when I mean an agenda is like something that you want from them and sort of trying to force or steer the conversation into that direction. People can sense when someone has an agenda. You can sense when someone's talking to you and they're really trying to push a particular thing. And it's generally something that we find to be off-putting or distracting or uncomfortable and affects our level of trust because it seems like the other person cares more about what they can get from us than what we might want or care about or our needs. So you're going to be able to find win-win situations if you can set your agenda aside and really listen to the other person, because ultimately nobody likes being told what to do until the person telling them has shown that they understand and respect or even like us. And that's key when I talk about the understanding part. You need to be able to, in a conversation with someone, show genuine care for who they are and what matters to them and what's going on in their lives. Whether they've started a new job, how certain they feel doing that job, if they have a certain initiative that they're trying to push, or perhaps if something happened in their family recently, you want to make sure to check in and ask about those things before diving into what you want in the meeting. So I think that this is key, and it really underpins all of the others because it's about being able to really listen to the other person and understand what matters. One of the best things you can do for winning someone's trust is acknowledging what really matters to them. Even if you're not ultimately going to be able to serve them in the way that they need, when a person knows that we care about them and what they care about, it builds that trust. It's key in terms of doing that. So step one, put your self-interest in check. 2 is be an advocate. This means being an advocate for others, and I'll say like standing up for them when they're not around. This is integrity in a sense. And it's really important. We like to know that when others, it's almost the opposite of gossip. It's being able to say in a conversation with someone else, well, look, I understand that training is really important to Jacqueline and her department. And what you're talking about sounds really relevant to her. And I think she'd be a supporter of this. In fact, I think you should probably set up a conversation with her and talk about it. She'd really like to know about this kind of thing. Jacqueline will be super grateful when you put her in touch with this person. And also, you've taken the time to do something for her that doesn't necessarily serve you, but rather serves kind of the greater good of the office. People are going to bring their problems to you, and you might not be able to solve them. You might know someone else who can. Being an advocate for those people that their problems get solved builds trust. They know that you're someone who they can turn to get those things figured out. That's part of being a trusted individual, showing that you're someone who will take the ball and run with it and pass it if they need to. This is almost like the opposite of gossip, because gossip is a trust eroding behavior that will involve kind of like putting in people's minds sort of negative impressions of others. This isn't to say that you should never do that. Obviously, we're all human and we might need to vent or share, but being able to take that with a grain of salt and being able to recognize when it's stepping into creating an unhealthy dynamic, and not necessarily helping to solve the problem. When you're able to, however, to demonstrate universally with everyone you work with that you are a person that will advocate for them, they will begin to trust you with some of their most personal issues because they know that you're someone who they can come to. You can also give them faith that you're the right person to lead the team and solve their problems as they arise, and that your priority is on them, and you'll do everything that you can to make sure that they are helped. So being an advocate is really big, and being responsible for how you talk about others in your conversations. Building on that, act with integrity. People need to feel that you are a person who means what they say. If you have a change that you want to make, and you can tell folks that you want to make that change, and then you do it and you follow through, and it really happens the way that you say it would, people start to trust that you're a person of your word. If you say it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And they don't need to double check you. They don't need to worry about whether or not it's going to get done or not. They can have full faith that you will carry through with what you say you're going to do. So this comes down to being someone who can share openly or honestly with folks if you don't think you can do something. Not making promises that you can't keep, and being able to admit mistakes or gaps in your ability to execute is key to integrity. I was just working on a project recently with a couple of clients, and my teammate and I had failed to communicate to one of our contractors that we needed something done by a certain date. And we were putting a lot of pressure on them to get it done by then. And it was a little shaky in terms of actually doing that. And I realized that this contractor was under the impression that we'd set the date arbitrarily, that it was just something that we were saying, like, we need it done by then, and didn't necessarily know why it was important to get it done by that time. They didn't really understand why we were putting all this pressure on them. And so it created this relationship of a little bit of tension. And what I did was I took responsibility for it. I said, hey, look, we didn't communicate to you that the reason why we wanted to release this on a given date was because we had another initiative that was coming up that partnered with it. These two were supposed to happen at the same time. The contractor then was able to sort of realize why it was important, and then doubled down their efforts and got the work done in the time we needed to. So building understanding and letting another person know why something is important to do is also pretty key. It's possible that this contractor felt that they didn't understand why we were taking the actions we were. And so by being able to clarify that and also own that we didn't communicate fully, restored trust between the two of us. So you want to be consistent in your words and your actions. And if you say you're going to do something, treat your word like it matters. Treat your word like it matters. And you can start with very small things. Promising someone that you're going to get an email out to them, or that you're going to send a certain package of information to them. And if you're not able to do it, having I'll call it the courage to be able to say that you didn't get it done. That's the key to being able to act with integrity. I would call it managing your word with others. It lets them know that you can be relied on. All right. So another issue we can come up with in trust is the false attribution problem, which is we are likely to attribute our own behavior to circumstances while attributing the behavior of others to their character. And this misses the point that everyone is a unique human being with a certain set of psychological conditioning, that they have parents, and a childhood that likely still impacts them today. And that they were shaped a certain way. We'll have a tendency to say like, oh, well, they're a bad person. However, if we act badly or we say something, we'd say, well, I had a bad night last night, or this client is really pissing me off, and I just said it because I felt like it. So that's kind of an excuse to get yourself off the hook that you wouldn't give to someone else in terms of behavior and communication. And so being able to build trust means being able to see someone else as a human being. And that's basically what the false attribution problem comes down to. And it's a big thing to be able to solve for. We have an exercise that we do that I do with people that I work with, where I have every team member go around and share a formative moment from their childhood that still impacts them today. This does not need to be a major trauma. In fact, it probably shouldn't. It should just be something that they remember and that they still feel impacts their behavior today. For example, I still remember when I failed my first trumpet recital and I never played trumpet again. And so I can be a little wary of risk taking sometimes, or putting myself out there. Personal. So being able to share that stuff builds empathy, and empathy builds trust. It also keeps us from seeing people a certain way. One of the clients I worked with felt that the CFO was really difficult and really strict and just very kind of no nonsense, and that would bother people. And when I ran this exercise, she told the story of how when she was 16, she was like one of the great piano players in her hometown, and she was kind of competing in some ways. And she had gone and she had this recital that she'd been preparing for months, and she delivered it at a big venue, and she played very well, she thought. And then after the recital, the only thing that her father had to say to her was, "You missed a note in the third bar." And that was it. And that was really difficult. And I think she learned in that time that, you don't get praise. And so this didn't make it so that they didn't still have difficult interactions with her going forward, but it did make it so that they could be more understanding when dealing with her and maintain that trust instead of just assuming that she is a bad person or difficult to work with or a problem. So that can be really useful. We'll talk a little bit more about understanding people towards the end of the seminar workshop today when I get to Myers-Briggs. So lastly, be transparent, especially in organizing work and when communicating with others. So I'm going to jump into a tool that allows that. Come with me. All right. So we're going to go here into, so this is a Jira software portal. To tools are a great solution for building trust because it has a reliable system that your team can openly communicate with. It makes a big difference, and the Atlassian suite of products has plenty of ways to do that. We are a consultant for the use of those products, which are becoming increasingly ubiquitous around the world, including Jira Software, Work Management for All, and Trello. You may even have people in your organization who are already using Jira tools to manage their daily to-do tasks. I'm going to demonstrate here how to build trust using one of the tools from their ecosystem. This is Jira Software, but note that this can be done in a number of other Atlassian products, including Jira Work Management, Trello, and Jira Service Management. So the key thing about this is it makes work visible. So what I'm looking at here is called a board, which is a place where everyone on the team can show up when they log in. And by having this board making work visible, whenever you log in, you can click on this and be able to see where are we in our current tasks. So what these columns represent is how far along a task is in its life cycle, from to do, in progress, in review, to done. So it's a steady thing that you can use, and tasks can be assigned to various team members. And they can also be prioritized in terms of important or less important. Making work visible is one of the most important things that Jira Software does, and it lets people collaborate in a way that gives you the comfort that work is being done and makes it very trackable, while also being useful to the employees who are using it. So if you click on one of these issues that people are working on, this is just a sample issue that I drew up. But at the top, you have the title of the issue. And then you have a summary of what it is. And here you can have relevant links to issues. You can create subtasks and you can attach files. So it's a really easy place for people to go to be able to see where we are in a given task. It makes collaboration just very natural. On a team that has a level of trust, there's going to be a desire to collaborate with each other and to offer help. Jira has a couple of ways for people on the team to offer their input about what are the most important things to work on. So this is a backlog. This is all the issues that are not in the current sprint. This is done as a sprint using the Scrum method, but you can also have projects that use other methods of storing your issues. But the point being, this is what the team is working on this week. And if we go into the backlog, this is just all the things that the team has to work on. That crazy thing. So you have these issues that folks are working on or could be working on. So if a user felt it was important for people to be able to talk about a certain issue, you can flag it. So you can go onto this issue and I could say something like, I feel like this would be excellent to have for our next sprint. Testing is still waiting on this to be done, and it will free them up to finish their work faster. So I can do something like that, click confirm, and then it's tagged. Really comes down to having a conversation as well as a team. This is why stand-ups are super useful, to be able to go into the backlog at the beginning of a week and see like, oh, an issue was flagged. And then being able to go in and see what the flag is for, who put it in, and letting that person speak. Also, if we're working asynchronously before the meeting, I can go in there and have a look and be able to see for myself that there is a flag on the issue and think about it before we even get to the meeting, because it highlights it in this kind of like nice yellow area. It is also possible to vote on issues and be able to sort of mark which ones you feel are the most important to work on. I believe you can do that in an active sprint. Yep. So it's with this thumbs up icon. So you can vote on it, and that'll leave a little vote, just a +1 on the issue. And if enough of those go through, then you can say this would happen in a team meeting where If enough of those go through, that'll be the issue that you prioritize, or that you think is the most important to get done, for example. But this would be something that in a team meeting you would be discussing, and you would say, all right, everyone go into the board and vote on which ones you think we should prioritize this week. And then you can get an idea of where the team is at. Their voice can be heard, which is key for trust building. And likely you're probably going to be able to focus on the things that are the most important to actually do. So that is how you can do that. The last thing you can do in terms of prioritizing issues is anyone with the edit issues permission can rearrange issues in the backlog. So if we kind of go down here and move certain ones, sorry, I don't know why it's letting me click and drag right now. I think I must have a setting on. You generally can be able to rank items in the backlog and move them up and down on this list to show which ones are the highest priority and not. Another thing that's really useful with this, for going back in here, is so with Jira, you can move issues in between different, these are called statuses. So the first status is pending approval. Then we move into ready to work, development in progress, development done, test done, and accepted. You can create the permissions such that every user comes on, gets a different board that they see. That's kind of like their version of the total number of issues. The product owner can see everything. However, once an issue has moved from pending approval into ready to work, then the product owner can see it on their board and the developer can see it on their board. So it pops up on the developer's board like, oh, great, I've got something new to do. Then the developer has their own little to-do list. They pick which ones to work on. And as soon as they move one over to something that they're going to be working on, it goes into development in progress. So then it works in progress for a little while. Once the developer finishes, they tag it to developer done, and it disappears from the developer's board and then moves onto the tester's board. Then the tester does their work. And then eventually testing is done. And then it can be accepted by the product owner, who kind of finalizes the issue and makes sure that like everything's okay. So this is the workflow for kind of the life cycle of an issue as it pops onto different people's boards. And this can be really useful because A, it reduces the clutter that people have when they're working on, but also there's a level of trust of knowing that things are going to get done as you're passing them on to other people. It is, however, still possible to find an issue in Jira. If you want to, you can go to the filters up here and search for it to see what's going on. How far along the tester is on what they're working on. And you can also add a due date to issues, which lets the tester know if there is any kind of like rush or urgency on a particular issue, and it'll help them prioritize it. Really, it's all about access to information and transparency is the theme we keep on coming back to. So long as all of the information is here, and this can be the single source of truth for when, like how far along an issue or problem is towards being solved, then you can go and have reassurance that like everything will be stored there. And that's incredibly helpful in terms of a tool and a process to work with. So yeah, I believe that frequent and honest communication on a team reinforces trust. So you can also do things like add reporting so that when I move an issue, using this back here, when I move an issue from testing to done, a little text screen pops off where I have to report and kind of answer a handful of questions about the issue to ensure that I have all of my boxes checked before it passes on, and give the person that I'm giving the handoff to all of the relevant information. So you can actually make it so that an issue cannot be passed on until certain boxes have been checked, which also improves trust because it creates secure boundaries. And we know that we're not going to have to go back and forth or get annoyed with one another for not doing something important that they needed to do. It comes down to conversations ultimately, and having different plays that your team can use. For example, if I need support on an issue, we as a team can agree that when an issue is flagged, it means the person working on it needs support and they want to check in about it at the next team meeting. Flagging is just a tool, and it can be used any way that a team sees fit. And really, it's just communicating about what your team's particular practices are and then sticking to that. So I think trust and collaboration really go hand in hand. So making work more collaborative builds trust, and building trust also makes work more collaborative. All right. Great. That's the end of our demo section. So a lack of trust can look like a couple of different things, but it's mostly two people sort of like this with their backs turned, angry at one another, who feel that the other is in the wrong and that they are in the right. For example, you could have two consultants who are going over the duties they need to assign for the client, and they divvy up those duties. Maybe one of the consultants is newer than the other one. And when time comes to deliver some of the items for the client on a certain due date, the more senior consultant doesn't have what they want or what they usually expect. And so they get angry at the other person. They get annoyed and say that this person doesn't get things to me on time. They might even vent to their friends and be like, they're so lazy. They don't know that the client needs this right now. Their frustration is definitely understandable, but it's not particularly helpful. And it really comes down to communication. There might have been unspoken expectations when they were divvying up the work. For example, the more senior consultant might not have said the reason why things need to be given at a certain time, or might not have even explicitly said something like, hey, so I get anxious if work is not delivered to the client by this particular date. I need you to tell me if you're going to have trouble executing on this. That communication helps the more junior client say something like, actually, I'm not sure if I can get this done. I'm still new to a couple of these processes. I definitely think I can get these things done, but this one I might need some support with. That conversation, being open and transparent about what our expectations and limits are, is what prevents situations like this from happening. We can assume that people are difficult or make negative assumptions about them, but that's ultimately really unproductive. What is productive is owning that this is a breakdown, there was a lack of integrity in the situation, and then working to resolve it by having open communication about what could have been done better and new practices for the future, and as much as possible, removing blame for that conversation and taking responsibility in every area that you see that you can. That's not to say that there aren't going to be things that people do wrong, but if we're willing to take responsibility, it starts to make blame lose its sting a little bit. And when both parties are willing to do that, it becomes a very safe space to talk about how we can improve and do better in the future. Trust is formed when we can be authentic and vulnerable with each other. But the key thing is that it is solidified when we are met with understanding from the other person. Nothing builds trust more than the other person understanding our needs and working to meet them. Saying something like, oh my God, I didn't even know that that's what you needed. Of course I'll do it. What if we try and do something like this? That is how we know we have someone who's really in our corner and has our best interests at heart. Being able to know what we need from our coworkers and communicating that is difficult to do, but it's immensely rewarding. However, there are some core problems with being able to share with one another. It can be difficult to know how to talk about these things. Many of us exist in work cultures where it's not really part of the culture to be honest or talk about who you are or your preferences. And many times we're not even necessarily aware of why we like something, or even that other people might look at the world differently than we do. So this can create an interesting gray area. Our solution was to give people a language to talk about their differences. We use the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, but you can really use any personality typing system. Ultimately, it's all pseudoscience, but what it does do is it gives us a framework to be able to discuss objectively differences in personality. Carl Jung proposed this about folks. He said people are predisposed to develop their preferences, and that differences between people are not totally random, but rather they fall into different patterns or types. And he was of the business of being able to see that. The Myers-Briggs personality system is built on the insights of Carl Jung, later translated by two women, Myers and Briggs, in the 1900s, and built into kind of the what we know today: extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, judging. What I really love about Myers-Briggs is that it is the way that we run our workshops. It is a process of self-identification. We don't use a test to tell you who you are. We let you figure out who you are. And that is a process of us talking through the theory and then asking you to assign which one feels true to you. This can be useful for a couple of things. One, light bulb moments about ourselves, or light bulb moments about each other. Oh my God, that's totally this other person. And being able to sort of see beyond your own type and start to realize how other people are functioning. So insights are a huge part of it. Second thing you get out of it, self-acceptance. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses that are built in. Sometimes we wish we were more like someone else's preference. It becomes very easy to forgive yourself when you recognize that every type has their own strengths and weaknesses, and that they all have a place and a use in the workforce, that they are all equally valid. It's also easier to communicate your needs by saying something like, I'm really extroverted, so if we can meet frequently while we work on this project, I think that'll be really motivating for me. Also, people's strengths become abundantly clear. It starts to become obvious that a certain person might be very good at dealing with people and big ideas. And that then lets you put them in situations where they can deal with people and big ideas. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the theory here so that you know what these types are and kind of give you a primer so you can start to assess for yourself where you might fall in any of these categories. So the first category is extroversion and introversion, which has to do with how do you direct your energy? Do you direct it towards your inner world of impressions and thoughts and ideas, or do you direct it towards your outer world? The things you can touch, see, taste, do. Actually, you know what? Let me backpedal a little bit. I want to make it clear that with all of these, you do all of these all the time. Everyone does everything. No one listening to this call is only extroverted. It would just be impossible. It would be almost insane to think of someone who is like that, who's completely out in the extrovert world. And likewise, there's no one who's completely introverted and doesn't have to communicate with each of these. You can think of it like you can't talk and listen at the same time, but you can do both in a conversation. So with both of these, you're switching between the two. We would call them processes, between these two processes, going back and forth. And the question really is, which process do you prefer to be in? What's your lane? Where would you rather be? That's the question. So with extroversion and introversions, how do you direct your energy, inner world or outer world? Sensing or intuition is how do you take in information? That is, are you more practical and kind of detail oriented, which is the sensing side, or are you more big picture and abstract, and theoretical, which is the intuition side? How do you decide and come to conclusions? Do you prefer to use your feelings, your values, and your personal relationships, or do you prefer to use impersonal logic and facts and analysis and cause and effect? With judging and perceiving, do you prefer to approach the outside world in a spontaneous and unplanned manner, or do you prefer to approach it in a planned, sequential manner where you're more directed towards ticking things off the box or getting closure? So those are the 4. And going through the workshop, the goal with everyone involved is simply to choose, yes, you do both, where would you rather be? And then the type comes from you picking your 4 kind of preferences, the 4 sides that you'd rather be on. And we do this in a big group in front of everyone. I'll be up there presenting, and everyone gets to listen and analyze for themselves as I go into more detail on each of these and let people really do a self-interrogation process of where they fall. So the intended outcomes of the workshop are to learn how others perceive you, learn how others perceive themselves, have insight into your personal strengths and weaknesses, have insight into your behavior in relationships and how you tend to work best, and for the team to leave with a list of ideas for how they can work better together. So this really comes down to being able to share vulnerably with others who you are, how you work, what makes you unique. The workshop looks like this. It's 4 hours long. I begin with an introduction where I go over a background of the theory and some ways for people to avoid common pitfalls with it, like judging themselves or using their preferences as a crutch. Like, I'm introverted, so don't ever talk to me. That's clearly unhelpful. So the introduction is primer to set people up for the workshop. Then I go over the theory of the 4 preferences. And after I go over each pair, I'll have people turn to each other and share where they are, discuss some questions, and be able to sort of process out loud, but also practice sharing with each other openly about who they are and what they prefer. Then everyone chooses their best fit, which is at the end of the process, you pick the 4 letters that seem to fit you best. Then we go on a break. Then we have a My Type workshop where everyone gets an individual readout of their particular type and gets to spend some kind of like quiet time reading it and digesting it and highlighting specific phrases that they feel describe them well. Then we get in a team and everybody shares those phrases with each other. From there, the team uses their newfound understanding and relationship with one another to be able to forge a brand new working relationship of how they can work best as a team. This is a huge breakthrough for teams and is often incredibly exciting. The conversation at these, when I lead them, is like you cannot pull the attention back from what people are talking about. They're so excited to talk about themselves. This is a demo of one of the slides. And you can imagine going through this theory and asking these questions of yourself of, well, which one is more me and why? And then being able to turn to the person next to you and talk. It's very exciting. And that feeling is really key when we talk about this. As you can see, just briefly, the introvert will tend to be more contained in their interactions and prefers their inner world of thoughts and ideas. The reflection is a really powerful space for someone like that. They like to think before they act. Whereas the extrovert is going to be much more quick in taking action and will often need to talk things through out loud. I'm an extrovert, I know this, in order to have in order to even think through their ideas. So they're amazing conversationalists, but might struggle alone. So consider which one of those might be you and how that fits into kind of how would you describe yourself to someone else given this framework? All right, and that's it. We have a couple of other things for trust building and culture building. We use tabletop role-playing games, which I will have a future webinar about, that is excellent for unlocking creativity of individuals and teams and putting them on a team-oriented challenge together. Essentially, it's designed to improve trust between folks and create a better workplace experience. But really, it lets people tell a story together And that can be a really meaningful journey and can be fun and funny and engaging, scary, or whatever. So we do that as a part of our culture here, and we offer it for external teams. I'll also be having a workshop on provoking productive conflict. The next stage on the 5 dysfunctions is to have productive conflict, and that means leveraging the trust that you have to have uncomfortable conversations together. You can learn tools to open the doors to having passionate but useful debate between your team members, and you can discover the importance of having healthy conflict, and that there might be conflicts that you're avoiding, but your team is actually capable of having, and that might really move the needle forward on what your particular projects are that you're working on. Conflicts can alter the course of your team's future. All right, and that's it. We are Valiantys, an Atlassian partner and consultant. We are here to provide excellence in the suite of Atlassian products, and we look forward to hearing from you later. You can feel free to, let me see, I'll get to mine. Oh, no, I don't have mine here. I believe my contact information will be put in the Zoom chat, and you can take a look at that and follow me on LinkedIn if you'd like to talk more deeply about any of these things or talk one-on-one about your particular team. I'm always happy to do a 30-minute call and kind of have some open, free consulting and talk through what you're dealing with and hopefully provide some value. All right. Thank you for attending, everyone. We'll see you next time.